Hi, I'm Perry. Eddie Stone, founder and CEO of Touchstone Essential, is with us today. Uh, Hello, Eddie.
Hi, Perry. Wonderful to be with you today.
Uh-huh. Thank you to be here with us too, Eddie. Talk about hurricane a little bit, Eddie. I'd like to know the situation there.
Yeah, so from the last time we spoke, the hurricane has come, and I think it's just about passed. I think it's now moving up the east coast of the United States, and it's been devastating mostly as a water event. The storm surge, and then it was really a slow-moving storm, and so it dumped trillions of gallons of water all over the eastern and coastal plains of North and South Carolina, and now it's sort of moved up into the mountains of North Carolina. And so the biggest issue that people have is flooding. Initially, it was falling trees and loss of electricity, and unfortunately, there's been deaths. As many as 25 people died. Most of my family is from the eastern part of North Carolina, so we have family that dealt with flooded houses, and even today some of the rivers are continuing to rise and will not crest until maybe this afternoon or even tomorrow. And so it's definitely still a concern. Excuse me. And we have a great deal of concern for just the people in their homes. There's people living in shelters, and so hopefully things will dry out in the next week to 10 days and people can start to do the things to rebuild their homes and get their lives back to normal. But it's been it was a big storm, and it really wreaked a lot of havoc in sort of those coastal low-lying areas near the coast.
Mm-hmm. There are storms here in Asia too.
Yeah, I saw a typhoon. I think I saw the wind speeds were upwards of 160 to 70 miles an hour that hit the Philippines and parts of China and maybe even parts of Thailand, and it had caused some deaths and a lot of destruction. So it's, I guess maybe it's partly this time of year, although now it seems like storms happen all the time. I know there was a hurricane at the same time, Hurricane Florence came through out of the Atlantic. I think there was one also in Hawaii. So have to take these things really seriously and prepare and try to keep families safe.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Okay, Eddie, can I start asking the question now?
Yeah, sure. Absolutely.
Okay. One person, Carol on Cape Cod, asking what's the difference between Prime My Body hemp oil and your hemp oil?
Well, I'm not going to pretend that I'm an expert on Prime My Body, but if you go to their website and you do a little bit of research, and I have some friends that have introduced it to me and their material, one of the biggest differences is just the cost. That product sells as represented on their website for $150 for 25 servings with 16, according to the label, 16 milligrams of phytocannabinoids. And I think cannabidiol, which is CBD, I think is the principal component of that 16 milligrams. So if you take ours, for example, instead of 150, it sells for $69, and it's 25 milligrams per serving. So ours is actually 750 milligrams. You get a 30-day supply at 25 milligrams per serving. Their product, I don't recall that they mentioned anything about it being organic or grown with organic practices. That may be, it just may not be represented on their website. They do talk a lot about using a nano emulsification process to make the molecules smaller to enhance absorption, but so do we. Ours is a nano-sized product to increase the absorption of the product and the surface area as well. So there may be some special feature that I'm unaware of, but just on the surface, it looks like a considerably more expensive product. And then a couple other things. I'm not a big fan of using artificial sweeteners, and I know that they do use artificial sweeteners for the product. I think the oils taste fine as they are, and I don't particularly like to encourage people to use gummies or sweets or things like that in terms of supplements. And so those are the biggest differences that I see. And I don't know any users, and so I don't have any feedback anybody's given me about the use of the product. But based upon their website and on the surface, those are the first couple things I see, I should say.
Okay, thank you. Next question, Eddie. I've tried to research liquid from Pet Flora. I've tried to research liquid zeolite, but it appears to be a network marketing item and quite likely a scam. What would you like to say about this, Eddie?
Well, I don't think the person has done their homework. That's the first thing I would say. We do work directly to consumers, but we think that's the more effective way for us to communicate to people. We rely on word of mouth advertising or people sharing our website with friends and family. And that means we can invest more in the product and less in trying to advertise. And so I've been involved in direct sales in sort of some form or fashion for almost 30 years. And I really like the fact that it's direct to consumer, but also that it gives for people that want to promote the product a chance to, build a business for themselves. And they can do that at sort of any kind of pace they want to, whether that's a very part-time or not at all, or on a larger scale. And we're happy to take money we'd probably normally spend on advertising to reward them for advocating or sharing our product. So having not known this person's background, they may have had a bad experience with the industry, but I've had bad experiences with insurance, and I've had bad experience with a physician, and I've had a bad experience with the financial markets. But that doesn't mean I don't have my money in a savings account. It doesn't mean I don't go to the doctor, and it doesn't mean I don't have insurance. And so you've got to be careful to make such blanket statements, at least for me, such blanket statements about that. And so I feel like if people do their research on us, they'll see that we have a lot of very satisfied customers. We have a exemplary rating with the Better Business Bureau. And in terms of the research on the product, I'll let that stand for itself. If somebody goes to our website and looks up Pure Body or Pure Body Extra, there are white papers with third-party scientific information documenting what we do. We offer independent testing. You can see the lab. You can see the lab results for our product's purity and size. And so we feel confident that no matter what kind of genuine research somebody does, we're going to be able to stand up quite well to the scrutiny.
Okay. Next question, Eddie. For this person, Virginia Bershaw. I live in Canada and try to purchase zeolite, and the health food store I have gone to does not sell it. To purchase it from the state would be costly. So do you have any suggestions?
Well, I empathize with what they're saying. Some of these countries, their laws have considerable import duties and GST or VAT taxes or duty taxes. So, every country sort of has their own process. In Canada, what we've done is we have underwritten the price of shipping. So what that means is the $20 we charge or whatever happens to be, I think that's the amount for most provinces. We've actually lowered that price because it cost us more than that. And so we are try to recognize for consumers it can be expensive. And maybe what they can do is try to make a larger purchase so that they can disperse the cost of shipping over, say, 4 bottles or 5 or 10 instead of just 1 or 2. Maybe they go in with their neighbor to purchase so that the shipping cost isn't as big a part of the order price. So we definitely understand where people are coming from. We do also offer, we've got a subscription program. And so at a certain amount, the subscription program allows somebody to get their shipping for free in Canada. And so we do have a good business there, but I acknowledge that it's not inexpensive from a shipping standpoint and wished we had a better alternative, but we've really shopped our shipping aggressively to find the best deal possible. And I do think we have a good deal, but it isn't inexpensive. I do acknowledge that.
Yesterday you have a promotion, right, for your birthday?
We did. And I was really impressed with how many people took advantage of that. It was fantastic to see all of those, really dozen upon dozen upon dozen of orders coming in. So that was exciting to see. We weren't really sure how many people would really react to that, but they did. And so we try to do what we can with promotions to help people out. And it was just great to see.
Yeah. Too bad they should have this promotion for Thailand too, free shipping.
We can work on that for the future. I do know Thailand, I think actually Thailand's in a more expensive situation than even Canada. And so we are constantly looking for ways to lower shipping costs, but we do acknowledge that it's there. It's very real.
Okay, Eddie, today what would you like to share with us about the health?
Well, I thought, and let me tell you where this partially came from. When the hurricane came through North Carolina, we had a situation occur that has occurred before. And so when we face any kind of flooding here, particularly in the eastern part of our state where it's coastal plains, it's somewhat flat, those are areas that they raise a lot of hogs or pigs and chickens on very large farms. And so regardless of what a person eats or doesn't eat, right, just acknowledging that North Carolina is perhaps one of the largest pork producers or growers in the Northern Hemisphere. I think Iowa is a state that also has a big pork production, but it's really a big deal here. And a lot of times in these commercial factory farming environments, which I'm not a big fan of, I'll be quite upfront with people about that. They have what are called large waste lagoons, where all those animals in a confined space, all of the waste they're producing, because they're trying to grow them so fast. I think it's under 90 days to go from a baby pig to a hog that would be slaughtered and carried to market. They produce a lot of waste, and so they go into these waste lagoons. And unfortunately, when we have heavy rains or flooding, those lagoons can spill out into the water system. And so, in fact, this has happened already here during the course of Hurricane Florence in the last month, where a couple of those lagoons were breached and spilled into the waterway. They drive up the nitrogen level of those water systems, and it creates a kill-off of the fish. And then they also spread a lot of heavy metals and other environmental pollutants. A second sort of environmental event that occurred here is a coal ash plant. So a power plant that burns coal, it creates an ash that's a part of the waste from the burning of the coal. And that ash is really very toxic. It's filled with mercury, lead, cadmium, chromium, very dangerous chemicals, and they store them on sites. And this has been really controversial in the state of North Carolina. I know many other parts of the world, because as it gets into local water supplies, can be very damaging and dangerous for local residents to have that be in the water system, because it seeps into the ground and it can get into their well systems. And so we just had one of those coal ash ponds, they refer to them as, actually breach and spill out. They don't yet know the full extent of the damage, but now that's in the ecosystem. And so it's in the stream. And so people that are fishing, taking fish out of those waterways, those fish are consuming food and water that now has been polluted. The fish themselves now are going to have those heavy metals. And so this whole cycle that can be, really very destructive to a person's health, dangerous even, can cause acute problems. And so I thought today I would talk about some of the ways that heavy metals can get into our bodies or into our lives, and we just don't even tend to think about it. And so sort of building off of these events for the past week. And so one is just in general public water. A lot of people in the U.S. and perhaps people around the world will recall there was concern in Flint, Michigan a couple years ago. Of course, that problem still exists today, where they discovered that the drinking water for local residents contained high levels of lead. It was contaminated with lead as well as other threatening heavy metals. It had a lot to do with how they were getting the water, how the water was treated. But at the end of the day, it's a lot about the piping system that's been used. And so it's all the way carrying into the house from the sinks and water pipes. Even in schools, they have this problem. And so public drinking water can be a problem. And a recent story in one of the national papers indicated almost 2,000 systems in the U.S. have a problem with lead in them. And so it's not just Flint, Michigan. There's great exposure. And I know this is true in other parts of the world. But subtle places like in your bathroom, looking at beauty products. People don't sort of think about it, but a lot of lipsticks have lead in them. Eyeshadows, other moisturizers will have contaminants in them as well. Cadmium, aluminum, often found in deodorant. And so we all do what we do, right, to make ourselves look the best or feel the best about how we look, but beauty products can be a problem. Generally, for anybody associated with farming, or even if you have a small garden at your house, the pesticides, herbicides, and fungicides that people use really can be a source of a tremendous amount of volatile organics. And so, anytime you're using these things, try to avoid directly breathing what's being emitted from the products that you're using. But heavy metals, again, go back to cadmium and lead, but arsenic is often found in these herbicides, pesticides, and fungicides. So, and unfortunately, these things make it into the food system. If you're buying ultra-processed foods, even high-end bakeries and breads will find these levels of contaminants. I know that people are concerned about some of the pesticides being used with Monsanto, and glyphosate is one that you find in Roundup. And so, it's definitely a concern. Dental fillings. I think there are probably a lot of people in your audience that recognize this, but silver fillings, amalgam fillings, as much as 50% of that content can actually be mercury. And as you're just going through the wear and tear of chewing, as that's exposed to food and the off-gassing, that can make it into your system. Furniture in your home, people tend to not think a whole lot about things they bring into their home, but furniture is treated with all types of protective materials, whether it's fire retardants, things that sort of protect the finish from absorbing a spill. If somebody spills something on the carpet, you don't want a stain to occur. But all of these fabrics and materials, because of those protective coatings, those generally are based upon chemical formulas that include heavy metals, so antimony and cadmium, and even pharmaceutical drugs. People tend to not think about it, but prescription drugs, because of the binding agents that are used, can often have heavy metals. So all that's to say, just pay attention to these things. Most over-the-counter antacids can have aluminum in them. And vaccines, of course, I imagine there's a lot in your audience that generally understand that vaccines can be preserved with mercury and other heavy metals. And so you want to know what a physician's using in terms of putting a vaccine in somebody's body. You don't want to just do that without understanding the preservatives that were used, the sourcing of it. The vaccine may make complete sense from a medical and a health standpoint, but just be conscious of where that came from. And then something as simple as house keys, house keys and car keys. So I don't know if this happened with your kids, but I know when I was young, and even with our kids love sort of the dangling of keys, right? Mm-hmm. And if you're a parent and you're at the grocery store or the restaurant or something, and the kids are a little fussy and you're trying to deal with just the moment, you give them something to play with and they want to play with your keys. But keys can be a source of heavy metals. Most estimates are that brass keys, which are quite popular, as much as 2.5% of the brass key content can be lead. And so lead's a very common thing that's used in production of materials in our society. And, kids are putting those keys in their mouth. And so it's very real. Something that's fairly new, I don't think people think too much about, are e-cigarettes. Whether those e-cigarettes are used for vaping nicotine, or perhaps they're used for vaping marijuana, whatever happens to be, the biggest culprit is, and this is anytime you're heating an oil, you're going to get oxidation that goes into your body. And I'm just not a big fan of flooding your lungs with anything except good, clean air, or maybe the smell of a good flower or garden. But I do recognize that e-cigarettes probably are more healthy as an alternative to people that are directly smoking. But those flavorings that they're using, we don't know the long-term effects of those. Those can very easily, you would find heavy metals, including cadmium, in there because of the way the substance burns out. And so it's just something to be conscious of. If you can avoid putting that into your body and your lungs, it's something people should try to do. And then maybe the last thing, in the rural parts of the country, maybe this isn't as big an issue, but man, if you're in a city, air pollution and vehicle exhaust pollution, traffic jams in the streets. I've traveled enough in really large, dense cities. I remember Taiwan, which I've spent quite a bit of time there, the mopeds and the exhaust coming out of the 2-cycle moped engines can almost create like a blue cloud around a stoplight as people are waiting to take off. And I understand people need transportation. And so they're trying to do what they can do, but you just got to know when you're breathing that in, you're putting those things in your body. So I have a policy that try to drink as clean of water as you can, and we've spoken about water on the show. Try to breathe as clean of air as you can. And if it makes sense for you to have an air filtration in your home, you should. Try to be conscious of your food. I know that organic isn't perfect, but as a general rule, things that are grown with organic practices are going to be cleaner than things that are generally grown with conventional practices. Neither are perfect, but organic would be preferred. And if you're trying to help your body out, exercise is a good way to try to help your body get rid of heavy metals. Eating greens, we know that greens act almost as an assistant to the body. And so anytime you can eat greens, and greens are a regular part of your diet, and I'm talking about deep green leafy stuff. If you're a juicer, that would help. And then, of course, we believe in detox, and we believe in using the gift that is zeolite, that natural mineral that has that negative charge, is also an assister or can aid the body in getting rid of environmental pollution. So, today, more than anything, I just wanted to bring it up so that people can be aware. And if you deal with chronic fatigue or chronic digestive problems, or you feel like you're locked in brain fog, and immune issues or headaches or just joint pain and stiffness, sometimes those things, they can have obviously other reasons. Sometimes it can be because you're just around a polluted environment, and just cleaning up your diet and your lifestyle will make a difference. So hopefully some folks, this will give them a chance to pause for a moment, sort of examine what they're exposed to. And if you can improve the exposure on these things, we actually have an article about this information on our site, and maybe you can post that for us in the comments section here. So hopefully that'll give people something to think about, maybe some improvements they can make.
Tonight before go to bed, I think I will take zeolite. My concern is beauty products because I'm using them every day.
Yeah, that's right. And so look at the labels, and just be conscious. And if you see some words on the label and the ingredients that you don't recognize, take the time to Google it and understand it. Now, sometimes beauty products, they can use Latin names for flowers and other things. And so you don't recognize it. You look it up and you say, oh, that's great. That's perfect. But just be conscious of it because it's a hidden way that these things get into our system.
Well, but it's everything in life. No, Eddie, life is not that easy to live, no?
It isn't. It requires you to be present, doesn't it?
Yeah.
If you're just only a passenger and you just let things come at you, then you're subject to whatever the plans of the world are, or the company is, or the corporation is, or whatever it happens to be. And so I really encourage people to step forward into their life and be conscious and intentional about their decision making. They may decide these things are all okay for them, but at least make sure you're making that decision instead of just allowing it to happen to you.
Mm-hmm. Thank you very much, Eddie, for all this knowledge. It's very useful. Okay.
Thank you, Perry. Look forward to the next show.
Okay. I see you again next show. Okay, next week.
Thank you. Bye-bye now.
Bye-bye.